Section 1. A meeting at dawn. Two worlds on the water. The Mediterranean Sea is vast and ancient. Before the sun fully rises, its surface can be a canvas of deep blues and soft grays, a place of profound quiet. It is in this quiet that our story often begins. Imagine a small civilian vessel, perhaps a converted fishing trawler or a modest yacht, pushing steadily through the gentle waves. On its deck, a diverse group of people stand together. They are doctors, journalists, retired teachers, and young students. They hold flags from many nations, their faces a mix of determination and anxiety. They believe their journey is one of peace and solidarity, a mission to deliver aid and a message of hope to a place they feel the world has forgotten. On the horizon, another shape emerges, growing larger and more defined as the minutes pass. It is a modern naval patrol boat, sleek and gray, built for speed and power. It represents the authority of a state and the sharp edge of its security concerns. On board, sailors and officers of the Israel Navy are also watching. They are young men and women carrying out orders, trained to see the approaching vessel not as a charity mission, but as a potential threat. Their radios crackle with commands, their eyes scan for any sign of danger. The vast, open sea shrinks, becoming a narrow stage for a tense encounter between two deeply held, opposing convictions. This scene has repeated itself in various forms over the years. It is a modern drama played out on an ancient sea. The core of the story is a confrontation, not just between boats, but between narratives. One side speaks of humanitarian crisis and the moral duty to act. The other speaks of national security and the legal right to self-defense. Today is October 11, 2025, but the events we explore took place over a decade ago and continue to resonate. To understand this showdown, we must listen to both voices, examine their motivations, and follow the timeline of their actions, all without choosing a side. The story is not about declaring a winner or a loser. It is about understanding the immense gap that separates these two groups, even when they are only a few hundred meters apart on the water. For the activists, the journey is the destination. For the Navy, preventing that journey is the mission. Both believe they are in the right. Both feel that their actions are justified and necessary. The sea is the neutral ground where these powerful, conflicting beliefs meet, and it is there that the human and political consequences of this conflict become starkly and sometimes tragically clear for the entire world to see. To understand why these ships meet in such a tense standoff, we must look at the land they are sailing toward, the Gaza Strip. Gaza is a narrow piece of territory on the Mediterranean coast, home to over 2 million Palestinians. In 2007, Hamas took over the territory. After that, Israel, with cooperation from Egypt, imposed a strict blockade. Israel calls the blockade a crucial security measure. The government says it prevents militant imports, weapons, rockets, materials that could be used to build tunnels and carry out attacks. From Israel's perspective, the naval blockade is a legitimate tool of defense. They cite international law, the San Remo Manual on Naval Blockades. Officials say essential humanitarian goods enter via land crossings after inspections. The Navy enforces the legal boundary at sea. Any vessel that tries to breach the blockade is seen as violating that perimeter. Activists see it differently. They call the blockade collective punishment and a violation of humanitarian law. They point to UN and human rights reports documenting dire conditions, high unemployment, a struggling healthcare system, electricity shortages, lack of access to clean water. For activists, the blockade is the root cause of this suffering. Their goal, challenge the legality and morality of the blockade, not just deliver aid. Flotillas are acts of civil disobedience, organized by groups like the Free Gaza movement and later the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. Activists know small shipments will not solve the crisis. Their tactic is to generate global media attention and political pressure. They aim to force a public conversation about the human cost of the blockade. By sailing to Gaza, they create a dilemma for Israel: let them through and weaken the blockade, or stop them and risk international condemnation. The sea becomes a platform for political expression. Section 3. The Flashpoint. Remembering the Mavi Marmara. The long-simmering conflict reached a tragic boiling point in the pre-dawn hours. May 31st, 2010, a 6-ship convoy, known as the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, approximately 70 miles from the Israeli coast. The largest vessel was the Mavi Marmara, a Turkish passenger ship carrying nearly 600 activists. The flotilla rejected repeated Israeli warnings to change course and head to Ashdod for inspection. The Israel Defense Forces launched a mission to intercept and board the ships. Most of the vessels were taken over with minimal resistance, but the situation on the Mavi Marmara escalated dramatically. Israeli naval commandos rappelled from helicopters onto the top deck of the Mavi Marmara. They were met by a group of activists. Accounts from both sides differ on the precise sequence of events, but the confrontation quickly turned violent. The Israeli military stated soldiers were attacked with iron bars, knives, and other makeshift weapons. They said one soldier was reportedly thrown overboard, and others were injured. The activists on board said they were defending their ship from an illegal armed assault. They said Israeli forces used excessive and indiscriminate force against civilians. The outcome was devastating. In the ensuing clashes, 9 activists were killed. A 10th would die years later from his injuries. Dozens more were wounded. Several Israeli soldiers were also injured, some seriously. The event sent shockwaves across the globe. It sparked widespread international outrage and a diplomatic crisis between Israel and Turkey. The United Nations Security Council called for an impartial investigation. Leaders worldwide condemned the loss of life. The incident became a powerful symbol for both sides. It cemented their narratives and deepened the chasm of mistrust between them. For supporters of the flotilla, the raid was proof of the brutal lengths Israel would go to enforce an inhumane blockade. It was portrayed as a massacre of unarmed activists in international waters. For Israel and its supporters, the event was a tragic but necessary security operation. They said their soldiers faced a violent pre-planned ambush by a hostile group. They argued the activists were not peaceful and sought violent confrontation. This single event hardened positions on all sides and ensured future flotilla attempts would be seen through its dark, polarizing shadow.
Speaking from the perspective of an officer in the Israel Navy, the mission is fundamentally about protection. Every day we patrol these waters with one primary objective: to safeguard the citizens of Israel from maritime threats. Our country is small and our coastline is vulnerable. We have seen, time and again, attempts to smuggle sophisticated weaponry by sea, not just here, but across the region. The rockets that have been fired from Gaza into our towns and cities are a constant reminder of what is at stake. When we see a vessel approaching the maritime security zone we are tasked to enforce, we cannot afford to operate on assumptions or good faith. We must operate on protocol and caution. Our legal advisors are clear. The naval blockade of the Gaza Strip is a lawful security measure recognized under the international laws of armed conflict. It is not a punishment, it is a preventative tool. We repeatedly broadcast warnings to any vessel approaching the restricted area. Our first communication is always to offer them a peaceful alternative: divert to the port of Ashdod. We promise them that any legitimate humanitarian aid they are carrying will be inspected and then transferred to Gaza through the official land crossings. We do this to balance our security needs with the humanitarian needs of the Palestinian people. Our goal is never confrontation. I was on duty during one of the Sumud Flotilla interceptions after 2010. The word Sumud means steadfastness, but for us, it meant another predictable challenge to a necessary policy. We shadowed their small boat for hours, radioing them in English, explaining the law and the procedure. On board, we could see people filming us, waving flags. It feels like a performance designed for cameras. Our orders are to use the minimum force necessary. We are trained extensively in non-lethal boarding techniques. The goal is to gain control of the vessel without injury to anyone, not to our soldiers and not to the activists. We are professionals, not aggressors. People forget that we are also human. We are young men and women, many just out of high school, fulfilling our mandatory service. We have families waiting for us back home. When we board a vessel, we do not know what we will face. We remember the violence on the Mavi Marmara, where our comrades were attacked. We approach every situation with that memory in mind. We are there to uphold the law and protect our country. It is a heavy responsibility, and we carry it out with the hope that one day these patrols will no longer be necessary. But until that day comes, we will continue to stand watch.
As an activist who has sailed on one of these flotillas, our journey begins not at sea, but with a profound sense of injustice. We hear the stories from Gaza: children who cannot get specialized medical care, students who cannot study abroad, fishermen whose boats are shot at. We see the statistics about the collapsed economy and the contaminated water. When governments fail to act, ordinary citizens must bear witness and act peacefully. Our presence on these boats is a statement. We see you, we have not forgotten you, we stand in solidarity. Our goal is explicitly non-violent. Ships are inspected before departure to ensure no weapons. We carry symbolic aid, medical supplies, children's letters, solar lamps. I can tell you about the moment we saw the Israeli warship. A grey spectre, fast and menacing. The imbalance of power is overwhelming. Our small boat versus their military vessel. Their voices come over the radio, cold and official, ordering us to stop. But we have a mission. We are unarmed civilians. On our boat, a parliamentarian from Spain, a doctor from Sweden, a journalist from New Zealand. We were not a threat. We were there to make a peaceful point. The tension is incredible. At any moment they could decide to board. When commandos boarded, it was terrifying though professional. They came with masks and guns. We sat on deck with our hands up, singing songs of peace. They took our phones and cameras, severing our link to the outside world. They towed our boat to an Israeli port. We were detained and deported. They call us provocateurs, but we see ourselves as messengers. We carry a message of hope to Gaza and a message of conscience to the world. We will continue to sail until the blockade ends and the people of Gaza are free.
The confrontations between the Israel Navy and the flotillas do not happen in a legal vacuum. They occur within a complex and heavily debated area of international law. Territorial waters, contiguous zones, international waters. The primary legal framework cited by Israel is the law of armed conflict. It governs the conduct of warring parties. Under that framework, a nation engaged in armed conflict may establish a naval blockade. For a blockade to be legal, it must be publicly declared, effectively enforced, applied impartially to ships of all nations, and it must not cause excessive harm to civilians relative to the military advantage. Israel argues its conflict with Hamas in Gaza is an armed conflict, making the blockade a legitimate act of war. Israeli authorities say the blockade meets legal criteria and that a land route for humanitarian aid exists. Therefore, any vessel knowingly trying to breach the declared blockade can be lawfully intercepted, even in international waters, and diverted. That right of interception is central to Israel's legal defense in the Mavi Marmara case. Yet flotilla activists and many international law experts challenge this. They argue occupation, they argue human rights law. Under that view, Israel, despite disputing the label since the 2005 disengagement, is an occupying power responsible for Gazan welfare. Critics say the blockade amounts to collective punishment, forbidden under the Fourth Geneva Convention. They argue blocking civilian access and restricting trade exceeds legitimate military objectives and violates human rights. The legal debate remains unresolved and highly politicized. UN reports offer conflicting or nuanced conclusions. The Palmer report found the naval blockade to be a legitimate security measure, but also found the force used against the Mavi Marmara excessive and unreasonable. That dual finding highlights the complexity. The law has become another battleground, with each side using legal arguments to justify actions and condemn the other, leaving no clear, universally accepted answer. The showdowns at sea between the Israel Navy and the global flotillas have left a lasting mark on the political landscape and on the people involved. For the activists, these voyages, particularly the tragic Mavi Marmara incident, cast a global spotlight on the Gaza blockade as never before. They spurred diplomatic crises, generated countless news reports, forced the issue onto the agenda of international bodies. While they did not break the blockade, they significantly altered the public conversation, turning a regional policy into a subject of worldwide debate and activism. The personal cost for some was immense, but the movement continued with smaller, symbolic Sumud flotillas. From the Israeli perspective, the flotillas represented a new front in a broader campaign to delegitimize the state. The Navy's actions, while drawing criticism, were framed internally as a successful defense. Reviews followed, and tactics were adjusted to minimize casualties. The naval blockade remains firmly in place today, a testament to the state's unwavering security posture. The net effect has been a hardening of positions. The deep-seated mistrust between the two sides has only intensified. The cycle of protest and interception has created a predictable but dangerous ritual on the open sea. For the people in Gaza, the flotillas brought a sense of international solidarity and brief moments of hope, but they did not fundamentally change the daily realities of life under the blockade. The flow of goods remains restricted, the economy continues to struggle, and the feeling of isolation persists. The story is one of powerful intentions clashing, with the ultimate situation on the ground remaining largely unchanged. As the waves continue to wash onto the shores of Gaza and Israel, the core conflict endures, far from any simple resolution. The sea remains a potential stage for future confrontations, a space where ideals of solidarity meet the realities of state security. The story of the flotillas is more than a tale of ships in the night. It is a microcosm of a much larger struggle over land, rights, and security. It leaves us with a quiet but persistent question. In a conflict with such deeply entrenched narratives of justice and survival, what kind of bridge could ever be built across the troubled waters that divide them?